We are entering uncharted territory. The number of teams in baseball that are bad at pitching development is shrinking. There's an argument that just 2 teams are left on the "oh no, he went to that organization" scale as we enter 2026, compared to 4 times that number just a few years ago. Baseball is learning from itself. So what do I mean by bad? I think there's a few ways you could define it. Take the Angels back in 2023, DFAing reliever Jacob Webb because I'm not really sure. He had a sub-4 ERA at the time, good changeup, good sweeper. It kind of seems like they just needed a fresh arm, did a not great job of roster management. He was promptly claimed by the Orioles after that DFA and went on to post a 3.27 ERA in 22 innings to close out that season. This is in the realm of roster decision bad, but bad could also be something as simple as pitch usage or deployment. I've harped on the Nationals for the last few seasons as to why Kyle Finnegan was throwing so many fastballs. I even got to talk about it on MLB Network in Orlando at the winter meetings. Finnegan averaged 71% four-seam fastball from 2022 to 2024. That is number 1 in baseball among qualified relievers, despite his four-seamer ranking dead average in Stuff Plus. When the Tigers traded for him at last year's deadline and immediately slashed his four-seam usage by over 20 percentage points, it was a clear indicator that however the Nationals arrived at that usage decision was bad. So which teams were bad that I think are no longer bad? To do that, we need to set a baseline. So let's go back to 2023. That season, we were at a subtle plateau in four-seam fastball velocity in the minors after 7 consecutive seasons of throwing heat. Results from a strikeout minus walks standpoint had actually ticked down for pitchers compared to the 2021 season where it was incredibly high. I'd argue that was due to hitters being severely limited in the live reps they saw from the pandemic lost 2020 season, but that's a topic for another day. If you just look at team pitching performance from that 2023 season in the minors using the same K-walk stat that I like, the bottom 12 capture almost perfectly the teams that were largely considered behind the curve at pitching development. In this group of 12, we can do some quick triage. The Guardians are objectively good at pitching development. They just do it in a different way. They were early on biomechanics and Kinetrax, a fancy way to say they care objectively about how you move as a pitcher and train accordingly. They're confident in their ability to develop velocity and draft accordingly. The Pirates, as you can tell from the prospect list, have done a great job in recent years. Bubba Chandler, Braxton Ashcraft, Hunter Barco, the recently departed Mike Burrows, Thomas Harrington. And I refuse to put any team that has Caleb Cotham and Casey Weathers in the bottom 10 of anything. That leaves us with 9 teams, 5 of which are really the reason why this video exists. They have made considerable improvements, many of those improvements occurring in the last calendar year. The most interesting case is the Nationals. It feels like they went on full purge like Jeff Luhnow did to the Astros in the 2010s. I can't go a day or two on X without seeing somebody else posting about how they got a job with the Nats. And I think this is a good thing. They hired Grayson Crawford to be their new director of pitching from who other than the New York Mets, the org that I think right now is number 1 in baseball from a pitching development standpoint. New pitching coach, assistant hitting coach, a bunch of new minor league staff, and rightfully so. For each of the last 3 seasons, the Nationals had pretty awful results in the minors from a pitching standpoint. Very little swing and miss, poor strikeout minus walk, decent contact quality allowed, but the net results just weren't that good. And perhaps most damning is the regression from 2022 where they were more average. It seems like they were just left behind as an org over the last few years, and Taboni came in and was given the power to change that pretty quick. The Rockies are on a similar path, one that I honestly thought they'd never get to. And it's not just internal hires. They finally brought in some outside opinions to help examine what on earth their North Star is from a pitching standpoint. The result is an entirely new pitching department. Matt Daniels is the new director of pitching, coming from Driveline and the Twins. Alon Leichman is the new pitching coach coming from the Marlins. And of course, you might remember him from being on the thumbnail of one of my videos earlier this year about pitch calling in the Marlins organization. At the winter meetings in Orlando, I was getting lunch with a few individuals at one of the hotels outside, and behind me, there was a driving range. For the entirety of our conversation, roughly an hour or so, there was a guy at the driving range taking swings. And I didn't know this because my back was turned to the driving range, but at the end of our conversation, one of the guys at the table said, "Did you guys see that guy taking hacks the driving range? This entire time we're talking, he was hitting the ball with an extreme slice." Basically no deviation in swing, the exact same swing every single time, and it was not going straight. That guy looked at me and said, I just want that guy to fail differently. We all kind of laughed. And it wasn't in that exact moment that I thought of it, but man, that is the Colorado Rockies to some extent. This entire last 10 years or so, we just kind of want them to fail differently. Although they've had small bouts of success, for the most part, their development has been way behind the curve. Their R&D has been way behind the curve. And at this moment in time, the Rockies embody that golfer. They have finally made some subtle adjustment here, and I love to see it. The reality is, I have no idea if the Rockies will succeed or make progress. I think the hires they made were great. They just have to do something different. Kudos for actually changing things. And I will say, I'm honestly excited to see what immediate changes look like for that organization in 2026. Another situation where I'm confident things are going to pan out positively is in St. Louis. Chaim Bloom has done this before. He goes out and brings in Rob Cerfolio from the Guardians as an AGM. Matt Pierpont moves into their director of pitching role from the Mariners. And it's no surprise to me that as they shed Sonny Gray, Wilson Contreras, Ryan Helsley at last deadline, and others to come, they have targeted pitching and also sent money with the players they're giving up in order to trade back or get back better prospects. They're loading up on arms with velo and deep mixes. There's maybe a subtle lean towards this cut fastball type arm that I talked about in my most recent video, and it's putting them in a really good spot to turn a few of these guys who have some reliever risk into impact starters. Now, the Marlins did what the Nationals did this offseason about a year ago. Peter Bendix came in back in 23-ish, takes a bit to churn out a lot of the old brass that you could argue was bogging down the Marlins developmentally. They slash four-seam fastball usage in the minors between 2024 and 2025, a clear change in their philosophical approach. And they didn't really have success in the majors this year, but I think they made clear strides with guys like Edward Cabrera, Ryan Weathers, Max Meyer, Robbie Snelling in the AAA, Thomas White looks good, and they had the tolerance and the integration as an organization to implement a pretty radical pitch calling strategy from the dugout. Now, our fifth team is the Athletics. They're kind of a tougher one to peg, but I think there's a subtle shift happening. They spent 2 of their top 4 picks in this most recent draft on Jamie Arnold from FSU, in deep cut personal favorite of a few in the industry, Zane Taylor from UNC Wilmington. That comes a year after they spent a competitive balance pick on Gage Jump, who would have absolutely gone in the back half of the first round if you're redoing the 2024 draft today. On top of that, they have the data to back up their improvement. 20 teams in baseball actually lowered their strikeout minus walk rates in the minors between 2023 and 2025. Perhaps, again, some signal that hitters are getting better. 3 teams, however, increased theirs by more than 1 percentage point, or about 10% overall. This would be the Mets, who again are number 1 in pitching development to me. They have soared over the last few years. The Marlins, who we just talked about taking some leaps, and the Athletics. What's the theme here that stands out among these 5 teams that I just detailed? It's the personnel, new people, new ideas coming into an organization, perhaps some cross-pollination of ideas from other organizations. But at the end of the day, people who these organizations believe can change the tone on the pitching development side of things. This gets to an idea that's sometimes brought up in economics called knowledge spillover. Now, I could get really nerdy on this topic, but the simple way to explain it is exactly how it sounds. Being exposed to new ideas and environments can help innovation. Take an employee from the Yankees, put them on the Angels, and they'd probably be able to ID what the Angels are doing incorrectly from a process standpoint. The roots of Silicon Valley in the Bay Area have some connection to this idea. California didn't allow non-compete agreements for a while, and this fostered a bunch of cross-pollination of ideas and job hopping. Now, that case is very different than baseball because baseball isn't really competing against anything else as an industry or another nation, for example, which is why we often see baseball teams deny permission for their employees to interview with other organizations. The Yankees are notorious for this. They'd rather just keep their advantage that they think they have internal. But I think change is somewhat inevitable. It's just that if the Yankees employee got to the Angels and ID'd their issues correctly, the problem is that a lot of the time those organizations just don't have the data infrastructure or size of their R&D department to actually execute the shortfalls identified. You could put a bunch of sharp minds in an organization and change something like pitch usage very quickly, but ask them to build out a tool to help coaches identify the proper seam orientation for pitchers using objective standards, and that is not a one off-season project, especially if that team doesn't have, for example, an effective stuff model or a usage model. Smart people getting into an org that's behind and telling me we just don't have enough resources is a common phrase I hear. I think my main point in all this is that it's good we're starting to see these teams that have not had success on the development side of things at least try or attempt to turn the corner. For the most part, we're waiting for these epiphanies to happen by ownership or higher up brass or staff turnover to occur or consistent long-term struggle for that organization to actually make the change. It's just good that we're finally getting this change in organizations that I think for the last couple of years we kind of expected to happen. So of those 12 teams we talked about back in 2023, examining them in the present day, we've eliminated 3 as actually good at pitching development. Again, the Guardians, Pirates, and Phillies. 5 of them, which we talked about, I would give up arrows on in the present day. So that leaves 4 teams that I haven't addressed, 2 of which I would say I am a bit concerned about. The Angels have everybody on a 1-year contract on their major league coaching staff. They routinely rush players through the minors. They have stalled the development of a lot of arms. They were rumored to have not allowed tech at one of the recent draft intake camps, which is insane in the modern day. They feel a bit hopeless outside of Jared Hughes, who they just promoted and I think is one of the sharper minds in baseball. I hope he has more autonomy to make decisions. The D-backs are perplexing to me as well. Now, they have a shot to prove me wrong because I think they kind of fleeced the Rangers for Merrill Kelly at the deadline by grabbing 3 really good arms. And they have a surprise 3rd-round pick from the 2024 draft who's turned out to be pretty good, but I need to see a leap from them this year. They had a 9.4% K- walk in the minors last season. That is awful. We haven't had a team below 10% in a season since the pandemic, and this was a big regression for them compared to 2024, where they were 3 full percentage points higher. After Brent Strom left, they brought in MLB personnel from the Orioles and Phillies, hires which I actually liked structurally, but I'm trying to figure out how worried I should be about these minor league results. I understand they play in disadvantageous environments, but that can't be the entire reason why they can't strike out or walk hitters. Now, the White Sox kind of feel like they're making their own bed because of their self-imposed financial limitations, although they did pay Murakami and now Sean Newcomb. Maybe some signs of life. Brian Bannister is a top 5 pitching mind in baseball. Pretty confident in that. They've actually had some success too. Shane Smith, Eric Fetty, injuries to Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith, but Grant Taylor is super fun. Fangraphs just released the White Sox top prospects and had 2 names ranked as 50s, which are basically number 4s in rotation that I wasn't totally aware of. So this is all good momentum. I think they've moved out of bad development land, but my concern is just that this R&D budget proposal from a few years ago didn't get approved, and they're just sitting on tech and infrastructure that's probably worse than the majority of D1 colleges right now. And maybe the Reds downtick from a few years ago, but they still have Derek Johnson. They've done a great job with Andrew Abbott, Hunter Green, Chase Burns. They're probably more neutral than bad. So we basically have 2 teams as we head into 2026 that I would consider bad at pitching development, and I'm happy to be proven wrong and hear arguments to the contrary. It's just my opinion on my perception of the industry overall. But what does this matter? What's the impact of fewer bad teams overall? I think the immediate idea is that there will be fewer of these instances where a guy in the minors jumps to another organization and has an immediate uptick in results. This could still happen in some ways because of the philosophical differences between organizations, but I don't think it's for the lack of competence in these organizations as they add a bunch of minds that will potentially have really strong impact from both development and acquisition standpoint. So it's going to get more competitive. These edges for teams like the Red Sox and the Mets and the Yankees and Dodgers that I think are still doing a really good job on the pitching development side of things. There's just going to be fewer instances of like, hey, you should be throwing a sinker or be throwing a sweeper and we give it to you and in 24 hours you're immediately a better pitcher. Things are just going to get a bit tighter overall. And I selfishly think that's somewhat good for the viewing public. Pitching is going to continue to get better. We've already seen some evidence that in the minors hitting is getting better. The sport as a whole will become, I hope, more competitive. Maybe there's a way to measure this in the minors as we go forward. K-walk contraction between the top and the bottom, or perhaps the other angle is that the advancements teams are picking up on the top end continue to accelerate as these other teams catch up, and we just continue to have this gap that keeps moving overall. But I'll stand by my idea. We just have fewer bad pitching development teams as we head into 2026. As always, thanks for watching my videos. Enjoy the holidays, as they've, I believe, already passed at this point. I'm putting this video out right before New Year's. Thanks as always for watching my channel. We basically doubled my subs this year, which was an outside goal of mine to get to right around 20K. It's really cool to see that. Some cool plans coming for 2026 as well. We'll continue to make more content. Appreciate you guys as I fumble over my words here at the end. As always, take care.